Hello, everyone. Today I have a very special guest. My guest is Zaranique Pope. She's a passionate human resources leader. And according to MCG Partners CEO Chuck Muller, she has an impressive understanding of challenging facing her executive team, organization, and culture in addressing leadership and DEI strategy development and change. Hi, Zaranique.
Hello, Helena. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Well, I want to welcome you to my podcast. It is so nice of you to come on. Thank you so much. So, why don't we get right into it? And let's start by you briefly telling us who you are and what you do currently.
Sure, thank you for having me. So I'm Zaranique Pope. I am an HR professional. I've been in human resources for about 20 years, that entire time supporting the healthcare industry.
Healthcare. Wow. So, how did you get your start in human resources? Take us back to that time.
So I actually fell into human resources. I went to school to be a forensic scientist. I was always
Wow.
interested in science, um, really had a kind of fangirl feeling about Forensic Files. It was a show that I still continue to watch. And so I thought I would be in the lab, being able to help police solve mysteries and crimes with my forensic studies. And when I went into school, I majored in biology. And I quickly realized that being in the lab just wasn't for me.
Mhm.
But wasn't really sure which direction I wanted to go into. I think at that age, most people don't
Mhm.
really know what they want to do.
Right.
And I have always very much been an introvert, always very quiet, very reserved. And my advisor had recommended that I take a course in communications. And so I took a public
Wow.
speaking course.
Mhm.
Very, very scary for me. But I really, really enjoyed that course. It caused me to kind of come out of my shell and realize that I wanted to do more work that involved other people. And I shifted my gears and changed my major to communications, found an interest in video production, and then thought I'd be on the cutting room floor. But once I graduated, without that experience, it was really difficult for me to break into that field.
Right.
And so I relied on my administrative skills and applied for an HR assisting position
Mhm.
at a behavioral health practice in Brockton, Mass. And I secured that position, starting off as a recruiting assistant, moving into a benefits assistant position, and then working my way up from there.
Yeah, so I want to talk about because this is also a learning experience for those who are listening right now, right? So I want to talk about you said you were encouraged by someone who encouraged you to take communications. Um, what it is about that person that inspired you to move on to that area, knowing that you had interest in other areas?
Well, this was my college advisor, and
Okay.
they had such a presence in the room. Every time they were in the room, you knew they were there. You knew who they were. When they spoke, people listened. And I wanted to be able to work on developing my presence, right?
Right.
I didn't know how to do that. I wasn't sure. I never wanted to be a public speaker, but I did want to be listened to when I spoke. Um, and so that just having her have such a presence and her saying, you can have this presence,
Hmm.
just try this out, really encouraged me to try something new and pushed me outside of my comfort zone. And I can tell you, I did not like having to stand up and talk in front of people. I still don't like
I
that.
mean,
It does still
that's
give
one of the biggest fears of most people, even today.
it does still give me anxiety. But
Hmm.
I think if she didn't push me to take that oral speaking class, I would not have, I think I wouldn't have been able to come out of my shell. I would still have severe anxiety
Right.
about being in front of people. But also in my role, in my profession, all I do is talk to people, right? That's a major part of my role. And when you work for an organization, you tend, for a lot of organizations, you tend to have open communication at town halls or your all staff
Hmm.
meetings, and those are usually led by human resources. And so I have chosen a profession that continues to push me outside of my comfort zone.
Right. So it's interesting that you said, you have someone. So in other words, you're saying it is important to have people to look out for you, and people that are also inspire you. Look at them and you see the impact that that person is having based on their own experience. And so someone who's encouraging you to go into communications, and you see you are also the chief officer of people. So having that communication background is serving the purpose.
It is. It definitely is. And I think throughout your life, you have people that kind of drop in and out
Right.
that acts in that capacity, and you don't always know it, right?
Hmm.
I didn't know it then. I did not know that she was setting me up for my path for success
Right.
in my career. I had no idea. But
Incredible.
there are people that come into your life that will challenge you. And I think challenges are very healthy, and they help to push you and help
Hmm.
you to continue to grow. And so I welcome people that challenge me
Right.
because it makes me think in different ways, and it helps me as a professional, but also personally to continue to
Hmm.
grow. And
Okay.
so I always tell people to, when someone is presenting something that feels challenging or it makes you feel like you're afraid to try it, it's because they want you to grow. They want you to be better, and they are looking out for you. And so at least just try it.
Hmm.
I think the worst thing at the end of the day, or at the end of your life, when you have all of these regrets, it's usually because you didn't do something. You didn't take that step to try something. And so I've been trying to live. It took me a long time to realize this, but I've been trying
Hmm.
to live without regret and try things. And whether I fail or not, at least I can say I've given it a shot.
Yes, incredible. So now that you have moved into and you've been in this role, like you stated earlier, for the past 20 years in this field, what would you say really kept you? What is it? What is the attraction to this line of work, and why healthcare?
Okay, well, I can tell you in the human resources profession, it is tough. It's very difficult, right? I think also human resources is multifaceted. So sometimes people think, human resources is about hiring and firing, and that's it. But there are so many things in between that we work with. And I think because it's so multifaceted, because it's always changing, that's what keeps me interested. Healthcare has always been an interest of mine since I worked as a candy striper at the what is now the Good Samaritan Medical Center in Brockton. So I started off really young, volunteering in a hospital. And I really enjoyed being in that setting, but I also knew that I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to be a nurse. I didn't want to work in clinical care, right? But I always had this affinity towards healthcare. And so I started my career in healthcare. And as I grew as a professional, I wanted to continue my career in healthcare. It's
Hmm.
just very rewarding. I think healthcare professionals are there to make sure that people are taken care of. And that's what we do in HR. We make sure that
Certainly.
people are taken care of and that the company is taken care of.
And especially in the time that we're living in, we've been through this pandemic for the past 2 years, and we've seen the stories. We've heard about people who work in healthcare, the sacrifices that they've made, and how much they care and want the patients that they take care of to get better. And so I can understand where you're coming from. But for 20 years, I'm sure you've had successes, and with successes, I think there are also challenges. Can you tell us about some of the challenges that you experience along the way?
Absolutely. I think as you had mentioned with successes, there's always challenge, right? I think healthcare in general is a challenging field. Things are always rapidly changing. There's so many rules and regulations governing certain healthcare bodies and institutions. And so I think that that's challenging. I think within healthcare, we can use the current pandemic as an example, when you have something that not only affects you professionally, but affects your personal life,
Hmm.
it's really difficult to continue to go on. And I think what we've seen through the pandemic is a lot of mental health challenges. What I've found about healthcare professionals is that they put themselves last, right?
That is
They
so
take
true.
care of everybody else, they take care of their families, but they really don't take care of themselves. They don't think about themselves. And in my profession in human resources, that's our job too, to make sure that our staff are taking care of themselves. But that was incredibly challenging, and that can be incredibly challenging through something like the pandemic, right? Where some things are completely out of your control. I think that's what's most challenging for me because I
Mm-hmm.
am a little bit of a control freak, right? I like to plan ahead. I like to be prepared for things. And I think with the pandemic, when it initially started, I think we all thought it was, it was going to be
Mm-hmm.
for a short period of time. But living through the pandemic, it has just been incredibly challenging, specifically in terms of keeping people healthy, which is completely outside of your control. You can do your best to put certain safety practices in place, but it's completely outside of your control. And then really on the recruitment and retention of staff during this time.
Yes.
Things have been changing not only within our nation, but worldwide, given the pandemic. And it has caused a lot of people to really rethink their lives, right? The value of their life, and making sure that their happiness is now paramount. And so that
Yes.
sometimes means leaving places that didn't
Mm-hmm.
make you happy. And we
Right.
are seeing people leaving the workforce in general. But we have also been seeing a lot of workplace flexibilities now through the
Yes.
pandemic. I think a lot of organizations have gone to a more remote or telework flexibility where they hadn't gone before. And that is creating more opportunities for people who really want a better work-life balance
Mm-hmm.
and be able to know that they can be productive working from home, but also have some more time to spend with their families. And that has caused for some organizations, specifically in healthcare, some real retention challenges.
Mm-hmm. So yes, you said it correctly. I was listening to CBS this morning, and there was a LinkedIn career expert talking about people are leaving companies in droves, and I think it's going to continue even more so in 2022. You talked earlier about people are leaving and people are rethinking and taking a deeper look into why they work for companies, and a lot of people are quitting, and there are ways to quit. People are feeling more comfortable to make the kind of changes that they feel like they need to make. There are also people who are thinking this is probably an opportunity to start their own business. As someone in human resources, um, I have a number of questions I want to ask, but the first thing I'll ask you is, um, why is it that so many people are leaving now? Why?
Well, whenever anyone leaves an organization or their position, they all have their own individual reasons,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for some, what I have seen are there have been a lot of childcare challenges with the pandemic as things change and as things um, progress with the virus. Um, there are a lot of challenges within childcare, right? And it's tough being a working parent and having a call that your daycare is closed tomorrow, and then
Mm-hmm.
you can't go to work, right? You've got to figure something out. And I think those challenges have been very real for working parents and caregivers in general. And that has caused them to rethink whether or not they can continue through this uncertainty. I think people also have been, especially for those who maybe had some time away from their jobs during the pandemic, have also been able to rethink, about their skill set and be able to learn new skills, go back to school and have some remote classes, um, and really be able to start to do more of what they want to do rather than
Mm-hmm.
what they felt like they had to do.
Right.
And then for some, it's just a matter of convenience and happiness. What makes them happy in their work life? What do you want to do? What would you like to do?
Mm-hmm.
Now there's so many jobs out there. There's a lot of opportunities for people to
Yes.
move into something they'd love to do.
So people are now, it's no, people are now again thinking, this pandemic has really given people a time to look at themselves and say, why am I here? Am I just looking for a paycheck? Or, you know, there are things that I want to do. I always wanted to do. And this is probably a great opportunity for me to step out and do what I want to do. So there may be some people listening right now who may want to create their own companies and grow their team. What do they need to know about diversity and inclusion, and why is that important?
Well, it has to be important to them, right? So you have to determine whether or not diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that's important to you
Mm-hmm.
in developing your new company or your own company. What does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you? What I found in 2020 that DEI was a hot button issue, and
Yes.
we saw a lot of companies really struggling with their DEI efforts. And we saw a lot of people come out and saying, hey, this is really important to us. And so we're going to strive to be better in these areas, right? In this area. And then when you look at 2020 and you go back and see what they have done, they didn't really do much of anything. They
Mm-hmm.
said it was important, but what were the actions that you took that
Right.
were important? And I think when you are working with people and they are working for you, you have to really walk the walk and walk the talk, right? It
Mm-hmm.
can't just be lip service. You have to mean what you say. And people realize after time, they'll give it a shot, right? They'll trust
Right.
you, they'll follow you. But at the end of the day, if you are not doing what you said you were going to do, you will lose those very dedicated people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to determine as a company, as an organization, if DEI one is right for you and if you mean it. Do
Mm-hmm.
not make any statements. Do not say you're going to do something if it's not right for you as a company.
Oh, you're not
That
ready.
may mean that you may be missing out on some really great talent, but
Mm-hmm.
at least that talent knows what you stand for as an organization before they
Right.
choose to join you.
So,
But I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, 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 go ahead. Complete your
But
thought.
it's a challenge in general. I think the other piece of when you're talking about diversity is really defining what diversity means for you as an organization. I work for a very diverse organization right now. And so it's really, for me, really challenging and rewarding to be able to work amongst a diverse group of people that have diverse backgrounds, diverse education, diverse experiences, but also come from many different places and speak many different languages.
Mm-hmm.
I speak one language, so I am always fascinated by anyone who can speak more than one
Yes.
language. I enjoy being around that, right? But that isn't comfortable for other people.
Right.
And so you really have to know the people that work for you, and you have to know the type of organization you aspire to be. Because
Mm-hmm.
as we know, things change in the world, and as an organization, you need to flex and change with the times. And so you've got to be able to be more flexible and adaptable as an organization and know that coming in when you're creating your own company.
Mm-hmm. So we also see that, like you said, some companies, they're thinking of how to get employees to stay. Some of them are focusing on culture and what they can do differently in terms of getting the kind of employees that are looking at companies and see how does the culture of the organization match my own, what I believe in. And so when you talk about DEI and you talk about diversity and inclusion, can you just give us a little breakdown on, as an HR expert, what, when we say diversity and inclusion, what does that mean? Because a company can be um, cultural, they can be diverse, but also is it culturally inclusive? So can you break that down for those of us who want to understand a little more of what does that mean when we talk about diversity and inclusion?
So that means different things for different companies, right? So generally, when you hear diversity, you automatically think of cultural diversity, right? But diversity could mean a number of different things, right? It could be gender diversity, age diversity, different diverse abilities. It could mean a number of different things. And so when you're looking at your organization and you're determining whether or not you're a diverse organization, the first thing you tend to do is look at your demographic makeup, right? You've got to
Mm-hmm.
decide and have a good idea of who actually works for you? What does your workforce look like, right? And I don't mean physically look like, right? I don't mean
Right.
what does your workforce look like? So diversity, as I mentioned earlier, means a number of different things. You as an organization have to determine what that means for you, especially if you're looking to recruit more diverse staff. What does that mean? You
Hmm.
have to define what that means to be able to move forward with any recruitment efforts, right? Um, I think diversity is one step. Equity and inclusion are the big pieces, right? And then
Hmm.
once you hit equity and inclusion, then you've got to make sure your staff feel like they belong there.
Right, right, right.
And those are really, to me, the critical steps that you need to take to make sure your staff that you're able to retain your staff.
Hmm.
People have to feel like they're welcomed. People have to feel like they have a voice. It doesn't always mean having a seat at the table. Not everyone wants to be at the table, right?
Well, that's true.
But they do want to be valued.
They
They
want to be
do want to
seen.
know that they are seen, that they are heard, that their skills are valued, that they are a necessary part of your organization. And for many, they want to be able to grow and they want to know what that path looks like, but they
Right.
also want to see people who look like them, who may have different backgrounds or similar backgrounds to them, be in those positions, be in those leadership positions, or be in the position that they are aspiring to grow into. Um, they have to see that. And that, I think, is where culture comes in.
Hmm.
Because when you think about culture and organizational culture, that is very also very individualized. People perceive culture differently.
Right.
So while an organization may strive to promote a specific culture, each individual feels that culture differently. And when you have people who work for you, they should be your ambassadors, right? They should be your culture ambassadors. They should
Hmm.
be able to um, promote what your culture is like. And so no one should be able to ask them, hey, what's the culture like at your company, and not be able to answer that, right?
Hmm.
They should be ambassadors for that company. But their answer may not be as positive as you'd like if they don't feel like they're included, if they don't
Right.
feel like they have a voice, if they don't feel like they've been listened to, if they don't feel like they've grown there,
Hmm.
right?
What are some of the maybe two or three tips or three things that you think companies who are focusing on culture, focusing on diversity and inclusion, and wanting to attract that kind of staff? What are some of the things that you think companies can do right now to get people to stay?
Well, I think if companies are interested in their staff, then their staff need to know how valued they are, right? They
Right.
need to know the impact that they have on the company, on a specific project in a specific area. They need to be appreciated. They need to be
Hmm.
recognized, and at sometimes also be rewarded for the work that they do, right?
Right.
I think what's also helpful is setting up mentorship programs within an organization so people have someone to go to, they have someone to talk to about their career progression, what that might look like, steps to be able to take. And I think your leadership is very important, right? Having
Hmm.
well-trained leadership that have really high EQs, that are able to not only know the business, but know how to work with people, how to manage people, how to grow and develop people, with the understanding that everyone is different and everyone is a person and that we all make mistakes, right? And
Hmm.
so also trying not to have a punitive culture or punitive environment so that people feel comfortable and know that if they make a mistake, they're able to fess up to that mistake and learn and
Right.
grow from that mistake.
Hmm.
And that it is on the flip side of that, also making sure that you have an accountable organization and that you're holding not only your first level staff accountable, but everyone within the organization is accountable for the work that they do in their behaviors.
Hmm.
I think those are some things that will help staff feel like they belong within the organization, keep them motivated, keep them engaged, and keep them there.
Hmm. Well, we have some companies that will try to do things to attract and keep their employees. But we also have, like we talked about, we touched on it earlier, we also are seeing a rise in entrepreneurship. So there are people who may have fears of starting, they have the skill, they know that they want to do something different, but they may have fears of starting their own venture because HR may find out. What are your thoughts about that, and how can people approach their businesses and not feel like if HR find out I may lose my job even before I decide how I want to go about doing my business? What's your thoughts about that?
Well, I would say not to be afraid if HR finds out, right? If you are doing something in your personal life that doesn't affect your work, your current job, then
Right.
don't worry about it, right? I think also a lot of organizations will have a conflict of interest policy. So go to your either HR department, your intranet site to determine if your company has a conflict of interest policy and what that looks like. Most companies will want you just to disclose that information to determine whether or not it's a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
But you shouldn't be afraid to try anything, right? Because at the end of the day, you're going to regret not trying that. But if you're afraid that it's going to conflict with your current work life, then you've got to determine whether or not it's time to cut hours so you can focus on some more time on developing your new business, or if it's time to move on to take that leap of faith and start to invest in yourself and invest in your own business.
Yes, I think a lot of the things that hold some people back is the fear of, I have benefits and I have a good paying job. To leave this and start something, you don't know what's going to happen. But if you don't start or if you don't try, you will never know
Well,
where you
never
could be
know.
tomorrow. So I like the advice that you just gave. So for people who are listening to you right now and who've been inspired by some of what you've said, um, and would like to get into the kind of work that you're doing, human resources, or to probably, start their own business and take some of the advice that you gave, what would be your advice to people who are interested in the kind of work that you're doing as a human resource professional?
Sure. So I would say for those who are looking to start their own business and you're going to be working with other people, you may not be large enough or need an HR presence right away. So there's tons of resources out there that can help you kind of manage policies and procedures, manage your workforce independently. One that's a really good resource is SHRM. It's the Society for Human Resource Management. That is a site, it is a membership site that really helps you kind of tap into HR sometimes without having an HR presence within the organization. So
Right.
there's a resource right there to be able to tap into that. It'll give you job descriptions, it gives you rules and regulations for your state, your country, your county, all of those things. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource to have.
Mm-hmm.
If you are someone who's looking to get into human resources, I can tell you right now, there's a ton of positions out there. And sometimes it means starting from scratch. And then if you're going into a new profession, I would looking at HR assistant positions. Sometimes it's not going to be labeled as HR. There's a lot of organizations that have human capital departments. They have people ops, people operation
Right.
departments. So it may not always be labeled as HR, but it's still HR. But also HR is multifaceted, right? So there's so many different areas of HR. There's talent acquisition, which is recruitment and
Mm-hmm.
placement. There is benefits, there's compensation, there's job classification, there's
Mm-hmm.
rewards and recognition, right? There's employee engagement, there's employee relations. There's so many different places you can go within HR. What I would say is if you're looking for something, really determine what it is you want to do. And then that'll
Mm-hmm.
set your path in terms of searching for positions within human capital, within the people space, um, to land your kind of first job.
I think all of those are very good advice. You also have a very list of impressive connections. Any advice would you, because you have, I'm saying this because I noticed that you're a founding member of some boards, you're also on a government organizations, you're on some community boards as well. Um, Connections have to be a huge part of that. So how did you get those connections, and what are some of the things the audience can start doing to become involved locally?
So it is similar to what I said earlier, right? There are people that come in and out of your lives that have an impact on your life that you never
Mm-hmm.
really realize until later on, right? What I realized a little later on in life, right, is that connections are key. Being able to develop positive relationships is something that within my profession is necessary, but has also come really easy to me, luckily,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Being an introvert, it came really easy to me. And I value those relationships and I tend to keep them and build off of them. And so for people who are, I use LinkedIn quite often, almost every day, to build those connections. And I make sure that I keep in touch with those that I went to high school with,
Excuse me.
those that I went to school with, because you never know what people are going to do. You're never going to know what they want to get into. You never know when you are going to be able to lend that helping hand to them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so your connections are key. Networking has never been my strong suit. Because I'm an introvert, right? It's never been my strong suit. But I have found that people who have similar personalities, similar backgrounds are drawn to me as I am drawn to them. And
Mm-hmm.
I've built connections over time. And those connections have helped me get to where I am. And luckily,
Mm-hmm.
I have been able to help them get to where they are. And so really tap into your network, tap into your friends who have friends and people who know people, and have them help you connect to other areas. People
Mm-hmm.
reach out to me often on LinkedIn to say, hey, I'm looking for an HR job. Do you know if anything is available? I do. I know tons of things that are available. And
Right.
I will connect them with a CEO that I know, or connect them with another HR professional who might be looking for some assistance. People reach out to me for things outside of HR because HR is a profession that is in every single industry, right? So you
Exactly.
know
Yes.
people
Mm-hmm.
in different places in different ways. So I would say for those, making sure that you're continuing to keep those positive relationships, you're keeping connected with others, and that you are using those connections to get to where you want to be, but also that you are tapping into those connections to help them get to where they need to be.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask you a question, and we're getting close to the end. But what um, is there something that people would be surprised to know about you? What would people be surprised to know about you?
Well, I think people would be surprised to know that I don't like to talk a lot and that I don't like to, I
You've
don't,
done incredibly well here.
I often tell people that I'm an introvert and they never believe me. I think I've said that maybe 5 times during this this talk,
Yeah,
right?
but I
They
understand that
never
though.
believe me because in my role, I'm always talking, right? I am
Right.
always leading a conversation. I am always leading a presentation or something like that. It does give me a lot of anxiety. I still get really nervous getting in
Mm-hmm.
front of people. Um, but it's one of those things that I have to push myself. And then after it's all done and over with, I'm like, God, it wasn't so bad. I always
Mm-hmm.
kind of make it worse than it should be. And it's fine. But I think when people are like, well, would you like to go connect here? Would you like to go to this event? My first thought is always, no, I don't want to do that. There'll be people there. There'll be too many people there. I think people are always surprised by that when I tell them that I'm an introvert that's forced to be an extrovert.
Yeah, I think you've done incredibly well here. Because I remember when I first approached you to come on the podcast, it's like, and I said, are we gonna be on camera? And he's like, I don't like to be on camera. And I said, we're just having a conversation. I think so far, I think you've done really well. So I understand. I understand though, when you say you're an introvert, but sometimes there are things that you have to do, and you just have to do them.
Mhm.
And so far, I think people who are watching this will say, I don't know what she's talking about. So we're coming to the end, and I want to ask you, for someone who's been in human resources and working in healthcare for a very long time, what's next for Zaranique?
Well, thank you for asking. So I have been in healthcare for about 20 years now. and have always been afraid to leave the industry to try something new. And I think at this point in time, it's a good time for me to now flex my muscles in a different industry and try something new. So I am actually leaving healthcare
You are.
to try something different in the financial industry. And I'm really excited about that. I'm excited for the new challenge. I'm excited to be kind of pushed again outside of my comfort zone and to
Mhm.
learn something new.
What would you say was the motivating factor that really um, make you look at what's happening in the industry and then say, you really want to make, because this is a big change after 20 years. What was the
It is a big
motivating
change.
factor? Yeah.
Big change, very different industry. I think I have always been tied to healthcare because of the mission driven work that healthcare professionals do. And I have learned in my career that your work can be mission driven no matter what industry you're in, right? And at
Right.
the end of the day, my goal has always been to help people. And while it's not hands-on clinical care, I've always wanted to be able to help in some way. And I've learned in human resources that you can do that in so many different ways in any industry.
Right.
And so I think at this point in time for me, I've had through the pandemic, I've had a lot of time to really evaluate things and evaluate my own insecurities about taking a leap of faith. And now it's time. It's just definitely time for me to put my fears aside and take that leap of faith because I know at the end of the day I will be able to
Mhm.
learn from it and grow.
Well, I mean, you said it very eloquently. You said, HR is in all different industries. So moving from healthcare to the financial services industry, it's just a different industry or different field. But HR, it's probably a lot of the things will be the same. Or most companies, they have different ways in terms of how they do what they do, but it's essentially the same thing. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And I wish you all the best. And before we go, is there anything that you feel that you would like to say that you didn't get a chance to say?
I would just like to say that don't try not to have any regrets in life, right? Life is short. If anything, through this pandemic has taught us is that life is short and that you need to really live it to its fullest. And I have been someone who has always erred on the side of responsibility and caution, right? And I do have some regrets about not trying some things in life,
Mhm.
and I'm not going to let that hold me back anymore. So if you are ready to start your own business, go start your own business. If you are afraid because you're so comfortable in one industry, but always wanted to try another industry, try another industry. Push yourself to do more because you want to do more and don't have any regrets.
Perfect. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. If you have a passion to do something that you always wanted to do, this is your chance. This is your opportunity. You may never get this opportunity again. So think about what you want to do. And like Zaranique said, go for it. So, Zaranique, I'm so happy that you decided to come on. And I think there's a lot that we can take away from this conversation today. So, I want to thank you so much for the opportunity. And I wish you all the best in your new endeavor.
Thank you, Helena. Thank
Thank
you
you
for
so
having
much.
me.
It was a pleasure.